I still remember that night, the beeping of the hospital machines, the smell of antiseptic, and the whispers I wasn't supposed to hear. The doctor had just walked out of the room after saying, "She might not make it through the night." But what broke me wasn't his words. It was what came after. From the corner of my half-open eyes, I saw my children, my own flesh and blood, standing near the door. My son whispered, "We should start clearing the house before the bank gets involved." And my daughter nodded, "Yeah, Mama won't need those things anymore." That sentence, it killed me faster than the sickness ever could. For months, I'd been fighting for my life, praying, crying, begging God to give me more time. I wasn't afraid of dying, not really. What I feared most was leaving them alone. But in that moment, I realized they had already left me long before I left this world. They thought I was asleep, too weak to speak, but I heard every single word. I heard them planning which jewelry to sell, which furniture to move, which memories to erase while I was still breathing. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them, "Stop. I'm still here." But my voice was gone, trapped in a throat too dry to whisper. Tears rolled down my cheeks, silent as my heartbeat faded in and out. I had raised them with love, working 3 jobs, saving every dime, skipping my own meals so they could eat better. And now, when my life was hanging by a thread, they were counting what they'd gain from my death. That night, as the machines beeped slower, I thought maybe this is how a mother dies. Not from sickness, but from heartbreak. I closed my eyes, not knowing if I'd ever open them again. And before the darkness swallowed me, I prayed one last time. "Lord, if you still have a reason for me to stay, show me, because right now, I can't see why." But God wasn't done with me yet, because what happened next changed everything. When I opened my eyes again, it was morning. The sunlight was bleeding through the curtains, and for a moment, I thought I'd made it to heaven. But then I felt the weight of the oxygen tube, the soreness in my chest, and the sting of the 4 in my arm, and I realized I was still alive. God had answered my prayer. I had been given another chance. The nurse gasped when she saw my eyes open. "Oh my God, Mrs. Beth, you're awake. You made it." She ran out to call the doctor, her voice full of joy, the kind of joy I thought my children would feel. But when they came, my children didn't rush in with tears or smiles. They walked in slowly, like guests at a funeral that already happened. My son forced a smile. "Well, look who's back," he said, and my daughter just crossed her arms. "We thought you weren't gonna make it, Mama." Her tone wasn't grief. It was disappointment. I tried to smile back, even though my heart was trembling. "God wasn't done with me yet," I whispered. They exchanged a look. One of those silent conversations that tell you everything words don't. For the next few days, they barely visited. The nurses stayed with me more than my own family did. And when the doctor said I could finally go home, I felt like I was stepping into a new life, one I thought would be filled with gratitude, hugs, maybe even tears of joy. But when the cab pulled up in front of my house, my smile faded. The garden I had tended for years, gone. The flowers, the little white fence, all replaced with a "for sale" sign. My heart dropped. I thought it was a mistake. But when I stepped inside, the house didn't look like mine anymore. The walls were bare. My furniture gone. My jewelry boxes, my photo albums. Even the old quilt I made when my babies were born, all of it was missing. I stumbled into the living room and saw a stranger painting over my memories. "Excuse me," I said weakly. "Who are you?" He turned, surprised. "Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. The new owners said no one lived here anymore." My knees gave out right there on the floor. They had sold my house. My children, the ones I worked my whole life for, had taken everything: the bank accounts, the deeds, even the keys to my past. I wasn't supposed to live, so they didn't wait for me to die. I sat there on that cold floor, trembling, realizing that I wasn't coming home. Home was gone. And that's when it hit me. Maybe surviving wasn't the miracle. Maybe the real test was surviving after seeing what my own children had done. After I found out my house was gone, I went to the police. I showed them the medical papers. The ownership documents I still had copies of. And I told them how my children took everything while I was in the hospital. The officer looked at me with pity, not justice. "Ma'am," he said, "if your name was on the deeds, they couldn't have sold it without your consent. Are you sure you didn't sign something before?" I did, but I hadn't known what I was signing. When I was sick, barely conscious, my son had brought me some papers. He said they were insurance documents to help with hospital bills. I could barely hold the pen, but I trusted him. I signed. That's how they did it. My own blood used my weakness against me. I went from hospital bed to homeless in a matter of days. Everywhere I turned, doors closed in my face. My children had blocked my number. My church friends were too busy. Even the neighbors I'd baked pies for wouldn't look me in the eye. I was like a ghost, alive, but invisible. At night, I sat on a park bench with my small bag of clothes, clutching the one thing they hadn't stolen, my Bible. Every page I turned had tear stains. I asked God, why did you let me live for this? Why save me if everything I loved is gone? But deep down, I knew maybe He wanted me to see the truth before I left this world. Maybe He wanted me to see who really loved me. Days turned into weeks. I found a small church shelter that took me in. The lady there, Sister May, gave me a blanket, a bed, and something I hadn't felt in a long time, kindness. When I told her my story, she held my hand and said, "Beth, sometimes God empties your hands so He can fill them with something better." I wanted to believe her, but every night, I saw my children's faces in my dreams, smiling while carrying my things out of my house. And every morning, I woke up with a question burning in my chest. How could they do that to their mother? Still, I tried to forgive them. I wrote letters. I prayed for them. I hoped one day they'd regret it. But they never came. Not a single call. Not even on my birthday. It was as if I had died that night after all, just not the way the doctor expected. But God wasn't finished writing my story. Because soon, a single phone call would change everything. A call that would expose the lies my children built their lives on. It had been almost 6 months since I left that hospital. 6 months of sleeping in church shelters, eating whatever the kind folks at the food pantry could spare, and trying to accept that my own children had erased me from their lives. Then one afternoon, while I was helping Sister May fold donated clothes, the shelter phone rang. She picked it up, then turned to me. "Beth," she said quietly, "it's for you." My heart jumped. Nobody ever called for me. I held the phone, my hands trembling. "Hello." The voice on the other end was calm, professional, a man's voice. "Mrs. Bethany Williams." "Yes," I said cautiously. "This is Attorney Richards. I'm calling in regard to your property at 416 Maple Avenue." My chest tightened. "My house." He continued, "I've been reviewing some documents related to the sale. Something doesn't add up. Your signature appears on several transfer papers, but it doesn't match the one on your previous legal forms." I froze. "You mean those papers my son brought to the hospital?" "That's what I'm trying to confirm," he said gently. "If you didn't sign those willingly, we might have a case of fraud." My knees went weak. Sister May guided me to sit. Fraud. That one word felt like a beam of light breaking through years of darkness. For the first time, someone believed me. Over the next few weeks, the lawyer met with me, reviewed my medical records, and gathered evidence. Turns out, my children had forged additional documents while I was in a coma. They'd withdrawn money from my accounts, sold my belongings, and even taken loans in my name. They hadn't just betrayed me, they had destroyed my life on paper. When the case went to court, my children showed up dressed like strangers. My son wouldn't even look me in the eye. My daughter cried, but her tears felt as fake as her apologies. The judge listened, reviewed the documents, and finally said, "Mrs. Williams, it appears clear that your assets were unlawfully transferred during a period in which you were incapacitated. You will regain ownership of what remains, and your children will be held accountable." Those words, "you will regain ownership," felt like breath returning to my soul. But no verdict could heal what they had done to my heart. After court, my son walked past me. He muttered, "You ruined our lives." I looked up at him and whispered, "You ruined your own when you sold your mother's soul for money." Justice was served that day. But it didn't feel like victory. Because money can be returned. But a mother's trust, once broken, it never comes back the same. Still, as I left that courtroom, I looked toward the sky and whispered, "Thank you, Lord. I see now you didn't save me to suffer. You saved me to stand." But I didn't know. My story wasn't over yet, because soon, karma would do what I never could. After the court case, I didn't return to my old house. I could have, it was legally mine again, but I didn't want those walls. Not after all that pain. I asked the lawyer to sell it and use the money to buy me a small place by the church. Something peaceful. Something new. The first morning there, I made a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the sunrise. For the first time in years, I felt peace. Not joy yet, but peace. I started volunteering at the shelter that once took me in. I cooked meals for others, folded blankets for the homeless, prayed with the sick, because I knew how it felt to have no one. Every thank you I heard filled a part of my heart that my children had broken. Months passed, and I stopped expecting anything from them. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means you stop letting their sins live rent-free in your soul. But then one day, I got another call. This time, it wasn't from a lawyer. It was from the hospital. "Mrs. Williams," the nurse said softly, "your son, Jacob, has been admitted. Heart attack. He's asking for you." For a moment, I didn't know what to feel: anger, sadness, relief. I just whispered, "I'll be there." When I walked into that hospital room, the smell of antiseptic hit me again, the same smell from the night I almost died. And there he was, my son, pale, weak, tears in his eyes. He looked up at me like a child again. "Mama, I'm sorry," he whispered. "I lost everything. The money, the house, everything. I thought it would make me happy, but it destroyed me." I sat beside him and took his trembling hand. "I know, baby," I said softly. "Money can't buy peace. It only steals it." He cried like the little boy I once rocked to sleep. I wiped his tears, even though mine were falling too, because no matter what he did, he was still my son, and a mother's love doesn't die, even when her heart's been shattered. A few weeks later, he passed away quietly. My daughter never came to see me, but I heard she lost everything too. The business she started with my money, the house, the friends. One by one, everything she stole slipped through her fingers. That's when I realized, karma doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it whispers, "Now you know how it feels." Now I live my days in peace. I tend to my little garden, visit the church, and tell my story so others can learn from my pain. If you're listening to me, remember this. Don't let greed blind your heart. And if life takes everything from you, hold on, because God can rebuild you from nothing.